Absolutely, it could be, right? But we're looking at this from a state-centric, not an agent-centric standpoint, right? So the idea is, where there is a bad apple, the bad apple spoils the bunch. The state is obligated to eject, theoretically, kill, what have you, or convert, indoctrinate individuals whose actions are counterproductive to happiness, counterproductive to virtue. And I just got the email from the editor, and I selected the book cover. The book cover is going to look so awesome. I can't wait. I'm super excited for this to finally hit the marketplace of ideas. I'm not going to make any money. I don't care about that. But it's just good to have like my first official, legitimate, super academic publication, you know, hit the world on genocidal intent. I wrote an entire chapter, a couple hundred pages on creating enemies of the state in a devious sense. Right? There is a sense in which if there is a legitimate enemy of the state, and the enemy of the state is legitimately bad, right, has the intent to, you know, exacerbate misery in the population, undermine the governance and structure, bureaucratized structure of the state, for all practical purposes, has to contain people like that. And you can fill in the blanks with however that containment, and you don't necessarily have to believe this, but the state has an obligation, according to Al-Farabi, to contain individuals like that. Al-Farabi goes so far as to say, eject them from the state. Right? Now, we recognize the inherent subjectivity of this claim. Nonetheless, Al-Farabi says, where there are individuals who act evilly, who act counterproductive, who seek to usurp or undermine the direction that the state is taking, assuming that the state is headed towards happiness, then the state has an obligation to eject these people. Conversely then, think about the type of state where the state does just the opposite. Right? Where the state attracts evil people. And actually this should look like this, right? Where the state attracts evil people, that becomes problematic, right? This is the immoral or wicked regime, right? Because what ends up happening is that individuals are going to be attracted. Imagine if you're an inherent sadist, and I would imagine people are born sadistic, or for neurological reasons. I wouldn't believe in demon possession or anything, but I think that unfortunately, biochemically, some people are just born to be psychopaths on the Cho level. Not like, oh, I'm a psycho, like people, I honestly 100% wholeheartedly have no problem saying it publicly. I absolutely believe, unfortunately, people are psychopharmacologically predisposed to violence, period. I believe that. And I think punishment becomes problematic. I think rehabilitation becomes problematic. All the consequences that follow from that assumption, I believe that, and I'm aware of that. The idea is, imagine that these people, don't imagine, these people do exist in the world. Imagine that a state rises to power that says, hey, we're the state where you can be the sadist you want to be. All the psychopaths, all the sadists are going to flock to that state. Because what ends up happening is you have a legitimization of violence. Right? And I don't mean any state legitimizes violence, but we're talking about sadistic violence. Right? The state then validates sadistic violence. Think about the National Socialist Party and Adolf Hitler's role in doing precisely that, validating via policy, sadism. Think about what happened. Think about all the things that is, right now I'm in conjunction with this, simultaneously doing a medical ethics series. Think about when the state decides to validate, and this is not, the United States gets implications as well. You might serve the state, but you're not going to worship the state, right? The state makes errors. In the Tuskegee Airmen syphilis experiment, the state knew that it was infecting African Americans with syphilis and watching them suffer, knowing full well that they could cure them. That's evil, right? And that was policy based, right? It was mandated by the state through the medical community, right? It was absolutely diabolically evil. There's no way around it. There's nothing to justify it. There's no legitimization on any grounds, conceptually or otherwise, for it. It's the wrong thing to do, right? If And it's also grounds for usurping the power of the government at that time. It didn't happen, but it is grounds for it, right? If the population would have been organized effectively and mobilized effectively, there should have been and could have been and ought to have been at that time a regime change. No question about it, because once the state adopts that policy, then it is immoral. It is acting wickedly. There are some justifiable means, there are some justifiable uses of violence. I am a Fanonian in that sense. I do believe that there is good violence. I believe that, and I recognize a lot of people don't support Frantz Fanon's sort of position on violence. I do support Frantz Fanon's position on violence. Maybe one year from now I'll do a full analysis of Fanon's discourse on violence. I do believe in legitimate uses of violence in the act of killing people to various extents, but I don't believe that that was a legitimate use of violence. Okay, so we recognize the nature of the evil state. So underneath the quote, a ruler that is incapable of expelling from the state, does not act accordingly. Those citizens who lack appropriate self-restraint, knowing the dangers they cause to the state, creates an immoral and a wicked state. Right? The incapability of the ruling class to eject individuals that they know to be wicked, to be evil. The inability of the state to control and contain people that they know to be wicked, to be evil, undermines sovereignty. It puts the population at risk. A perfect example, I can't believe I'm actually going back to this zombie example again. But the dude, I'm here in Miami, right? Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Dude in Miami goes off, runs around butt naked, eats this homeless guy's face. The state comes in the form of the police, and gives him a warning shot, shoots him in the leg. Dude's still eating this guy's face. In a really sick sense. There is a responsibility, whether you want to admit it or not, and you don't necessarily have to believe this point, because I know it's a contentious point. There's a responsibility of the state to kill that dude. He needs to die. When you're at that level, you can't rationally speak with the individual. You can't rationally recognize that you ought not to be eating another human being's face real time. Nah, the state got to put you to death. You have no business existing. If the state allows that to become the norm, then what ends up happening? Right? You go back into a state of nature in a Hobbesian sense where, life is nasty, brutish, and short, right? It's just blood-filled and tooth and nail, right? You can't have that. You can't have that. So this is a direct quote from me then. For Al-Farabi, and let me, because my power on my phone, which is my clock, is dying, so I gotta plug it in. Give me 1 second. Oh, come on. Oh, thanks. Sorry. I should edit this out, but I don't feel like editing it out. Okay. And how much time do I have? I might have to do part 3 later. Yeah. I'll have to do part 3 later, because I'm not going to have time to go through all of this now. It's 2 hours I've been watching. Jeez. So this is me. Bottom of page 6. For Al-Farabi, then, evil threatens the stability of the city and thus the state. Right? We understand that now. Why? Evil threatens the stability of the city and thus the state. If we are to safeguard the state, we must seek to instill virtue into the lives of every citizen. Otherwise, vice will spread, destroying the population. That's obvious. And inevitably destabilizing the state. Right? The systematic destabilization of the state, conceptually speaking then, according to Al-Farabi, in terms of a virtue-based ethic, is a consequence of positing the wrong desire, the wrong end, the wrong goal. Misery as desire, misery as goal, as posited by the population, as posited, as reflected by its electorate, the ruling class, results in an evil state, right? There's actually a rap group called the Evil Empire. Shout out to the Evil Empire. They make good stuff, but it's not the Evil Empire. So here's the conclusion. This is my interpretation specifically. Some people might not agree with this. No individual is more important than the state then, including the ruler of the state. Right? The idea is to go back to the Socrates example. If you are mindful, you recognize that you have an obligation to serve. You have an obligation to serve somebody. No one gets away from that obligation. Everybody has an obligation. everybody has the obligation to serve. Whom we serve is different. You might serve a bad guy, you might serve a good guy, but you're going to serve somebody.